Hello. A big boat, a big win, a record entry, a punchy race, and we head offshore. Plus regular helpings of Docktalk. But first, take a look at this. Yep, it is what you think. It's a foil-assisted super yacht. She's called Raven. She's 111 foot long and has been built by Baltic Yachts in Finland. And what a weapon of a boat. The original concept, along with the exterior and interior styling, was by Jarkko Jamsen, with boat-in partners providing the naval architecture and pure design responsible for the structural engineering. She's described as a foil-assisted ultra-lightweight super yacht and will be used primarily for day sailing, but also capable of high-speed long-distance passages. Setting aside her stunning looks for a minute, the canting foils are what really stand out. Unlike the America's Cup boats that fully fly, Raven's T-foils are designed to reduce the displacement by raising her slightly out of the water. To adjust her fore and aft trim at speed, she has interceptor trim tabs on the stern. And in the aft quarters, she's got water ballast tanks to generate more righting moment. Interestingly, the 5 metre deep 9.3 tonne keel is fixed. Lifting a boat of this size out of the water even slightly is an ambitious exercise. Raven's target weight is 55 tonnes. To put this into context, the recently launched all-carbon Baltic 110 weighs 95 tonnes. So weight has been a major focus throughout the design and build. In fact, it's been an obsession. They shaved 100 grams off every carbon pipe bracket. They saved 160 kilos by switching out steel hydraulic pipework for lighter hosing. They reduced the shower door weight from 13.5 kilos per metre squared to just 2.3. And by choosing their adhesives carefully, they saved 6 kilos. The interior is stunning, yet every element has been assessed for its weight. On deck, Raven is just as impressive. The bird's nest cockpit structure provides an observation dome. The aft cockpit can be semi-enclosed, much like a giant Imoca. Having rolled her out of the yard, the next stage is to conduct sailing trials, without the foils, at least to start with. Then Raven will spread her wings. What a machine! And for those that said foiling arms would never catch on beyond the Cup, well, just saying. In the America's Cup world, the focus has been on Barcelona, as teams are now making their move to the Spanish host city.
There's going to be a bunch of two-boat sailing with the AC40s through into the fall when we're leading up into the first World Series event in Villanova, and then later in the year we'll get into sailing Patriot here in Barcelona, which will be really exciting to have a big boat out sailing here too. But focusing on the two-boat AC40 program for a couple of months to really get into some racing practice and really, quite honestly, it's the fun part of this program where we get to do a bunch of race practice with two boats against each other. It's going to be exciting. We're looking forward to it.
The talk of the town continues to be the sea state that's making life pretty tricky on foils. We'll be bringing an update on the ins and outs of the road to the America's Cup shortly. In SailGP, Season 4 got underway in Chicago, where New Zealand took the top spot in the light and tricky conditions. Season 3 winners Australia were forced to take second.
It was definitely difficult, especially in the 10-boat races where there's just so much bad air, especially around the pre-start and stuff, but I think we did a good job keeping our nose clean. Getting a good solid one on the board to start with, and then it was pretty hard for us to miss the final from there.
It looks like being a busy season, with 10 teams now on the start line after Germany joined the racing. Next stop, Los Angeles. Spoiler alert, 11th Hour Racing Team won the ocean race, after the international jury found in their favour and awarded Charlie Enright's team 4 points in redress after the dramatic collision at the start forced them out of the final leg. But I'm guessing you probably knew that already.
I've been trying to do this for a long time. Been sailing for over 30 years, and this race has been a goal of mine for over a decade now. And to stand here today in this position is it's amazing. It's really a dream come true. And to be honest, it hasn't totally set in yet. Because we've been sailing here under different circumstances than maybe we would have liked, but that doesn't really take anything away from it. We're really enjoying the moment, and it's just been such a team experience from top to bottom, from the beginning. I mean, where do you want to start? It's been a 3-year campaign, and we just feel really lucky to have the support of 11th Hour Racing, who's stuck with us through ups and downs, and they've always believed, even when the future was quite uncertain. And we had 2 goals as a team. One was to win this race, and one was to be champions of ocean health, and one is done, and there's still a lot of work to do on the other. Certainly we look forward to working with them on that and whatever's next in the future. But just an amazing, amazing experience.
You probably also knew that Boris Herman's team aboard Malizia pulled off an impressive win for the final leg with their skillful handling of the super light conditions at the end. This was particularly impressive for a boat that had originally been considered by many to be a good bet in heavy conditions but slow in the light. After 30,000 miles, we now know differently. So after their impressive final performance, I spoke to co-skipper Will Harris. But I also caught up with Round the World sailor and regular Planet Sail commentator Dee Caffari to see what she made of this extraordinary edition of the race.
So much better than I anticipated it being before it all started and unfolded. And as you say, I'm exhausted at the end of this race, and I've just been talking about it. And it's been a drama after drama, and highs and lows of the extreme, and also the range. So you can have massive budgets with 40 people in a team, 3 years preparation, or you can have a team that's come straight out the shed with 8 people, minimal budget, and they've got round and been just as competitive. So that's been really interesting. I think the scale of the teams and investment into the project, and how competitive they still managed to be, how they've overcome issues, some common issues as well, a lot of J3 locks that I think a lot of the rest of the fleet are now looking at. And also with the footage that we get of how they sail, there isn't a single IMOCA skipper that hasn't been looking at that footage and learning just as much as the skippers that are on there from how they've been sailing their boats. This has been 31,000 miles of really valuable data and information of how to sail the boats, how to perform, the double foiling, the different sheets, the different ideas with the design of the boat, what's good and what's bad. The ergonomics behind some of the boats has really interested me. I'd love to have done an athlete survey as the sailors come off each leg from those boats where they couldn't stand up down below, and you see them all hunched over the whole time, compared to something like Malizia where you see them all stood up and feeling quite good about life.
What's the problem?
Yeah, and has it cost them? Well, you could argue some legs it did, but they won the Southern Ocean leg, they've won this last light transition leg. That's quite interesting as well. So I think it's just been a real game changer and eye-opener to the IMOCA world.
There's been so many moments in this race where we seem to be the comeback kings, the team that managed to pull it together, sometimes at the last minute, sometimes just a bit later on in the leg. And when we first designed the boat starting in 2021, we really tried to think out the box and not go kind of down the usual route of looking straight at the computer models. It was a boat built more by the sailors, and also having done the last Vendée Globe in the previous version of Malizia. And from that, we realized we wanted to step away from the most hydrodynamic, most aerodynamic and lightest boat and look towards a boat that's more suited for the stronger conditions. So, and we really saw the advantage we had, in the Southern Ocean, in the big winds, and in some of the other lakes as well. We had 10 or 15% more speed than the other boats, and that was really impressive to see, and great that the ideas that we had have kind of worked out. But in order to achieve that, we had to compromise in say slightly lighter winds and marginal conditions, and the disadvantages we find in that is really quite minimal, a lot less than we expected, and even in the light winds we have modes where we're faster than the others still. So I think we've definitely got a boat here that's really promising for the next Vendée Globe.
Do you think we're going to see changes in those? Are there? I mean, people were talking about Holcim PRB had their bow changed before they even put the boat in the water. Do you think we're going to see big changes as a result of this in the IMOCA fleet generally?
I think there's been, as we all know, in design, before it's even built, there's some really big decisions made. And now we've seen proof of some of those decisions in action. But it's the ergonomics of how the people survive those conditions that's interesting. We've seen a couple of head injuries. Charlie Dallin, when he jumped on board 11th hour, had a head injury. We've seen shoulder injuries. Rosie's had a head injury. So that whole, how do we look after the sailor so they can keep performing with the boat, is really important. And I think maybe there's some big decisions to be made there of how do we get them to rest as well as we can in these conditions that these boats provide. How do we get them to sit safely so they can navigate and do their weather and the media, and those kind of considerations, more than the boat. If I can sail the boat, if I'm at 100%, there's more chance I can sail my boat to 100%.
Compared to the other boats, the accommodation and the interior of the boat, you can't really call it accommodation, but the interior of the boat is cavernous, and you can stand up in it, move around, and obviously we know that on any boat it's absolutely, the motion is brutal. But it does seem that at the end of each of the legs, particularly the hard ones, when you get to the finish, you're the only crew that can stand up and walk around the place. But did it sort of feel like that? Did you feel at the end of it that actually you felt more, I wouldn't say refreshed, but you weren't quite as battered when you looked at some of the other crews?
No, I think you're totally right in saying that. And I think, it goes back to one of the other questions of, why do we always seem to be so good at coming back? And I think that's, the other teams, they end up, physically they end up being more tired, more fatigued from living on these cramped, unspacious kind of conditions, which in reality affect your mental state, and may see you slightly more negative than, say, we are with our better living conditions, which then means that we spend more energy focusing on making the boat go fast. So, it's completely kind of out the box thinking there, I think, to kind of analyze your design of the boat on human comfort so much, and that's really what we went for. And the ability to be able to stand up is, life changing. If you can't stand up on a boat, then life's going to get pretty tough pretty quick. And I think that's where we've had a big advantage over the others. And I think the other IMOCA teams and IMOCA teams in the future will be taking this kind of human performance element into their designs a lot more in the future.
Well, that's a very interesting point, because it leads me on to the next question, which is, and really based on what two skippers actually said to me in Aarhus about, they said the days of the minimum weight IMOCAs, they're over. And I think what they were trying to imply at the time was that actually, in order to make them faster, you need to make the boats more livable, more workable, more durable, and the rest of it. And you can afford to spend a bit of weight to get there. Is that how you see it? Do you think people have been more likely now to invest the weight in the boat in order to get a faster boat because it's easier to sail?
I think that they're looking for such small gains. We've just seen now a fleet of 5 very different IMOCAs be super close to each other every time they're on the water on every leg through the whole range of conditions. I mean, even the 600-mile lead that Holcim PRB had was shortened down to not winning, and they were finishing within hours at the end of that excessive Southern Ocean.
Yes.
So I think that the small gains are much smaller than we all imagine, and actually the performance of the sailor is critical. I think if you can't if you're not in a good shape to make a good decision and be strategic with your race, it doesn't matter how good your boat is.
The other thing we seem to hear or see anyway, was how easy it was to get incapacitated really quickly if you fall over, get thrown through the boat, as some of those that you mentioned. So yes, that's a big risk, isn't it? And then because you've only got 4 sailors, you're immediately 25% down. So
yeah, and I think in the back of people's minds, they're thinking, well, if I'm doing a Vendée Globe, if I convert that information to a Vendée Globe, if I'm down, there's no one. Yeah, it's game over. So they have to be really careful. And it's little considerations that we're seeing a lot more of. We saw a lot of the rugby skull caps being worn, or even, you know, a crash helmet. Charlie Dallin, when he had his head injury, you know, he recovered and then he wore a crash helmet the rest of the time. You know, the guy can't do wrong. Like, it isn't a race he hasn't won every time he steps on the water, yet he's realising. And he's obviously made some decisions. His boat's just been launched, so it'd be really interesting to see how he adapts, how he sails.
what about the race itself, the ocean race itself? Where do you think it goes from here? Do you see this as a positive thing going forward?
Transition's always hard. People really struggle with change. I'd like to think there's a future because it's, you know, it's a bit of history. Everybody that is involved in sailing has been inspired by the Whitbread, the Volvo, the ocean race at some point. What we are seeing is the lack of, with the reduced number of sailors, bringing less people on. It's a more kind of elite group that get access to it, but it doesn't stop everybody else watching and being inspired and have aspirational thoughts of, wouldn't that be great one day? So I'd like to hope it would carry on, but it's a long time to the next race and a lot can happen in that time.
At the very least, it feels a lot more positive than where we all were before this race started. I mean, of course, the pandemic years didn't do anybody any favours, not least of all the ocean race.
Well, I think if we think back to conversations we were probably having a year ago, it was really uncertain, a massive question mark, will they even get any entries? And now the last 6 months has shown us that even with 5, with all the issues that have gone on and only 3 boats racing the last leg, it's still been amazing sailing to watch. And even when people wanted to dismiss the last edition being one design, the last 2 editions being one design, and how, you know, oh, that's not exciting, it's not innovative, it's not where, you know, kind of technology wants to be, nobody could argue how close the racing was of like one design racing and how intense that was. So I think every time it seems to defeat the arguments against it and live up to its reputation. So long may it continue.
Since they were first revealed as a key part of the next 2 America's Cup cycles, the AC40s have been drawing a great deal of attention. These are the most advanced one-design monohull racers in the world, and while they make for a spectacular sight on the water, the engineering behind the scenes is every bit as impressive. Hydraulics lies at the heart of the control systems on an AC40, and in this area it is Italian manufacturers Caraboni that have not only delivered some impressive kit, but have raised the bar in the process. There are 13 cylinders aboard an AC40 and they're anything but standard. Take the foil canting arm. Caraboni supplied a double-acting titanium cylinder with a push-low pressure of 450 bar. That's more than 6,500 psi. The rudder rate control requires an intricate twin cylinder. The main sheet traveller cylinder needs to be 2 meters long, as does the cylinder for the main sheet. And at the other end of the scale, the foil flap cylinder has to be small enough to fit into a very tight space in the cant arm. Hydraulics has been a major part of the AC40 project. While much of the focus of the AC40 has been on foils and flight control systems, the evolution of the Southern Spars rig has also been a steep learning curve. The task set by the Emirates Team New Zealand design team who created the AC40 was an ambitious one. High apparent wind speeds would mean some very high loads, including high aerodynamic drag. The mast would need to cater for the complex double-skin mainsails and would need to rotate. Many of the details, such as the carbon luff tracks, titanium Cunningham tracks and configuration of soft tangs, were taken from the full-size AC75s. But there were more challenges in store for the spar builders. Dispensing with the masthead backstays was one. Catering for the huge amount of Cunningham load that doubled in the last Cup cycle was another, as was understanding how to control the shape of the double-skin mainsail without using stays. Building a mast for an AC40 was anything but straightforward. The task of creating a double-skin mainsail was something that North Sails had expected when the new generation of America's Cup monohulls was revealed. The development took sail plans into a new dimension. Twin skins provide flatter cambers and lower drag. They're lighter yet more robust than the solid wings of previous Cup cycles too. Rotating the mast on a soft sail helps change gear, especially when getting onto the foils and transitioning to high apparent wind speeds. But this Cup cycle has also delivered the next stage in development. The clew continues to be a complex area of the sail, but some areas have got simpler. Control systems at the top of the mainsail are no longer allowed. Now mainsails are on a halyard lock, leaving Cunningham, Sheet and Traveller as the primary controls. Design details that are already proving valuable elsewhere in the sport. When it comes to grassroots offshore sailing, one of the topics that keeps popping up is the growth of double-handed sailing. This season's no exception. In fact, this year's Rolex Fastnet race has another bumper entry. And someone who knows this scene well and competes in it regularly is Nigel Colley of Sea Ventures, who's been looking at the numbers and considering the future. So I caught up with him on his Sunfast 3300 just outside the Planet Sail office. It's interesting, isn't it? When you look down, you've been looking at some numbers on the Fastnet about some of the stats, and one of the things we know straight away is that the Fastnet this year is bigger than it's ever been before.
Yeah, it's the 50th edition of the race, so the Rourke and the UNCL are putting on a big party for us in Cherbourg. A lot of engagement. It's going to be the big one.
Now you've been looking at some of the numbers, drilling down with a particular interest in shorthanding. That's your bag, as we know.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about what you've found.
There's 472 boats doing the Fastnet race, of which 363 are IRC rated, and out of that 363, 108 are double-handed. Now that is 1/3 of a total fleet in IRC is racing double-handed, which is pretty amazing really.
How does that compare to last? Is that a big increase?
That's a big uptick on the previous race. The trend had started 2 years ago, but this is just another massive uptick.
Why do you think that is? Why? I mean, because the Fastnet's not exactly an easy race to do. Why this big increase?
Well, it's just an extension of the whole short-handed scene, which started to mushroom about 3 or 4 years ago, and every year it's got incrementally bigger. And then earlier this year, you see, I think 1/3 of the Sydney Hobart fleet was double-handed. We've just had the IRC European Championships, first leg off, 57 boats entered. You compare that to the IRC Nationals, fully crewed, where I think we had about 30 boats in total, spread across.
Double the entry.
Double the entry, double-handed. So the whole scene is still growing.
What kind of boats are people sailing then? Let's start with what kind of size are they going for?
The typical double-handed IRC boat in France and England, the main gravity is from 32 to 38 feet, rating spread of around about 1.0 up to about 1.050, and that represents about 3 minutes an hour in rating spread. So it's quite a compact fleet, and that is where the bulk of the fleet lies.
And over 5 days, so let's say the Fastnet is 5 days, what kind of spread would that be in ratings then, in terms of time at the end of the race, do you think?
I think it works out over a 5-day race from the smallest boat to the biggest boat in that rating spread about 6 hours. So about 1 hour a day from the biggest boat to the smallest boat.
Yeah, interesting.
It's very tight.
Yeah. And what kind of boats are we seeing there? Is it a big mix? Is there anyone dominating it?
Yeah, there's a mix. I mean, the dominant brands, if you like, are the Jeanneau Sunfast, JPK and J-Boats. Those are the 3 dominant brands. And the fleet's fairly evenly spread between those 3 brands. They're all similar size, similar style, similar ratings, and they're all available and affordable.
Now you mentioned just a minute ago, you mentioned about the IRC European double-handed championships, isn't it? And that's just, as we're talking now, that's just finished. Now you also looked at the results of that, and there's an interesting conclusion in there as well.
Well, the conclusion of that, quite clearly, is that the French, in terms of performance, completely dominate the scene. I think the top 14 boats in the first leg of the IRC double-handed championships were pretty much all French before the Brits or anybody else got a look in.
Why is that?
They've been engaged with the double-handed scene a bit longer than we have. There's more of a short-handed following with things like the Class 40s, the Amokas, which are aspirational, and you do find that they've got more events in tune with short-handed racing wherever you go on the Brittany coast, from Lorient to La Rochelle to La Trinité. They've all got their own training groups and they go out and train together. They combine resources, there's no pride at stake, they just go out and learn. They share results together, they share the experience. So as a fleet, their performance has just been getting better and better. And it's a big step change for us in the UK to replicate that and get as good as they are. Every now and again we can be as good as the French, but statistically, on average, they just blow us away.
Amazing, isn't it? But as we know, short-handed is changing in its definition as well, isn't it? Because I know we came and covered the Sunfast Cup, your Sunfast Cup last time. We had double-handed and fully crewed at 4.
Yeah, well, fully crewed, we limited the crew to 4, and actually that was a huge success. Most of the boats were sailing 4 up, and they had a ball. You know, they brought their mates along, or they teamed up with other boats. But short course racing around the Cans, 2 or 3 races a day, that's hard work, double-handed. But these people can't go and get a crew of 7 or 8 people. Getting a crew of 4 people, no problem at all. And extending that to the offshore scene, if you want to go and race offshore fully crewed on a 33, 34, 35 foot boat, you can't really sleep more than 4 people once you're in port. They're not configured for it. So we're sort of starting to think that the new short-handed is 4 up.
And you've got some plans around that, haven't you?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, decades ago when we were young kids on the scene, and we used to go off and do something like the Rorke St Malo race. Then we'd hang around and do, I think it was called Course de Zille or Samandaminkies,
yes.
Which is point to point, port to port day racing, social every night, and we had a laugh. And nothing like that happens now. You know, you can go and do your Rorke style races, which are very competitive, very good fun. You can go and do your winter series, spring series, round the Cans racing, fine. But we've lost something over the years. And why can't we go and race from the UK to Channel Islands, to Brittany, to the West Country, back to the Hamble area, a week-long event, port to port, get points along the way. You can change the crews along the way if you want to. We can engage the local yacht clubs for all the socials. 5 days off work, spread over 2 weekends. So it's not a new style of event because it's quite common in France. It's not so common here in the UK. And now we've got this big short-handed scene which needs feeding. Otherwise it'll fizzle out like all the other scenes have done over the years.
Excellent. We look forward to it. In the meantime, what are you doing the Fastnet on this year?
I'm doing it on here, fast track, double-handed, which is probably the genre of racing I enjoy most. We've got a great fleet. I think we've got about almost 20 some fast 3300s doing the race. So we're going to have a fleet within the fleet.
Fantastic. Well, you've got quite a fleet here at HYS. It almost feels like one design city here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's great stuff. Thanks very much for filling us in on that, Nigel. It sounds really exciting. And good luck with the race.
Yeah, I look forward to getting you on board next season racing 4 up.
You say that every year.
It was a benign start to this year's Round the Island race. A light breeze in the morning could have lured many of the 1100 competitors into thinking that 2023 would be another gentle cruise around the Isle of Wight. Those who had looked at the weather forecast knew better. The northwesterly breeze made life easy on the leg down to the Needles, with few if any tacks required. The fun started from there on, as the 20 to 25 knot breeze saw squalls roll through, pushing the breeze above 30 knots at times. With the wind against tide at the southernmost part of the course at St Catherine's, this made for a wild ride for many. By the end of the day, some had had it worse than others, with 2 multi-hulls capsized and several dismastings reported. Interestingly, the boat that took line honours also won the Gold Roman Bowl for the first boat on corrected time.
It is indeed a magnificence, a little terrifying if you are on the boat, and our spiritus rector here, Neil, had found the perfect opening for us to have a clear lane, which made all the difference because there were so many boats. The master of everything sailing, and he predicted yesterday afternoon that we would do it in 4 hours and 10 minutes on the computer.
And?
We did it in 4 hours
12.
and 12 minutes, I think.
I was lucky. We were very fortunate. The weather god shined on us, and it could have been a different story. A little less wind, and I doubt we'd have done quite as well, but we were in a great slot of the weather. Perfect.
Notorious was reasonably close.
They were good, and I think if the weather had been a little lighter, the shoe would be on the other foot, and we were lucky just to get enough wind to get ahead of them downwind. Upwind they were sort of equal, if not better, when it was light. They were more nimble. So yeah, we 2 very different boats that rated very, very much the same.
Ceramic bearings now form the inner workings of Harken's new zircon blocks, which the company claims will provide much more accuracy for trimmers. Bore races are of course nothing new to Harken. Back in the 1970s, Delrim was the material that helped to create the deck gear giant. Named after zirconium, from which the bearings are made, zircon blocks reduce the rolling resistance of the sheave and improve the power transfer to the crew. At the core of the zircon blocks is a single row of ceramic balls, which run on ceramic inner and outer races moulded inside the sheaves. The ceramic balls are much harder than steel and smoother too, qualities that mean less energy and response time is absorbed before the sheave starts to move. As zircon blocks get more widespread, sailors have begun to incorporate them in cascade rigs for sail controls. Filmless and composite sail fabrics have been a popular talking point in recent years, especially among those sail makers who've been using Dimension Polyant's new Tyra ply. Since 1966, customising sailcloth has been at the heart of what they do, and today Tyra ply is their latest. The material starts with a spread of filaments that can consist of high modulus carbon, aramid and ultra polyethylene. These are spread into tapes which are then laid into an inner matrix, orientated at angles between 0 to 90 degrees in varying densities. The fibres are then bonded together without the need for film, which both reduces the thickness of the sail and enhances the stability of the material and ensures no shrinkage. The fabrics are very strong too. Dimension Polyant claim that a Tyra ply cloth of 7,000 dpi has the same strength as a traditional equivalent of 12,000 dpi. No wonder it's been a talking point. Upgrading standing rigging from conventional steel rod to carbon is not always straightforward, but Palga Carbon set out to make sure it can be. Their solid carbon rod standing rigging is made from very high modulus carbon. It's 80% lighter than steel, and along with having a higher tensile strength, the stays are the same or smaller diameter than conventional steel rod rigging, offering a benefit in windage too. The end terminations are titanium and are compatible with traditional stainless steel fittings, tip cups, cap tangs and turnbuckles. Longevity has also been a key factor in the design of the stays.
Pauga say that with regular maintenance, their rigging will last as long as the carbon mast itself. And then when it comes to the practical details, their rigging can be coiled to make it easy to transport. Impressive. No one takes crossing the notorious Tasman Sea between Australia and New Zealand lightly. But on Saturday, the 7th of October, the Royal Prince Alfred Yacht Club will be up in the ante with the start of the inaugural Sydney to Auckland race. With 1,250 nautical miles of open ocean between the start and the finish, no one will be in any doubt that this is a true ocean race. Among those to take part, Mark Griffith's DK46 Old School that was recently crowned IRC champion at the Sydney Harbour Regatta this year. French yachtsman Marc Dupré has also been working towards the race with his Beneteau Figaro 3, the first in Australia. Entries for the race close on the 1st of September. In some cruising circles, saying the P word is a no-no, a turn-off, and a word that should never be used if you're trying to encourage people into the offshore cruising life. But I've always had a big problem with that. To me, performance is not necessarily about straight-line speed. It's not always about racing, and it's not about push, push, push. Instead, performance starts with a boat that's well balanced, a boat that's easy to handle, and with those two characteristics, a boat that not only eats up the miles, but does so with the minimum of stress. That's what performance should mean. For 37 years, the French company has staked its reputation on creating blue water cruising cats where the P word is at the heart of the concept. One of their most popular models has been the Outremer 55, with 80 sold since 2021. And now they've just launched a new 52-footer, which has already been staggeringly successful. Over 60 boats have been sold since the model was first announced.
So, to find out how and why the latest cat has proved so popular before it even hit the water, we've come to Outremer's home, La Grande Motte, in the south of France. And to kick things off, we're heading offshore for a couple of days to get stuck in. So we left La Grande Motte about half an hour, 14 minutes ago. We're now a couple of miles offshore where the conditions have really picked up in this offshore breeze. We're just going past Port Camargue. We're going to turn around the headland and then head east up towards Marseille, up the Frioul Islands, which is about 70 miles away. And at 10 knots, that shouldn't take too long at all.
The Outremer 52 was designed by VPLP, along with Patrick Lecaimont and Franck Darnay Design, a hugely experienced team. But on the face of it, when you look at Outremer's modest production range that starts with a 45-footer and ends with a boat just 10 foot bigger at 55 foot overall, you might wonder why they felt the need to create a new one that was just over 1 foot longer than the boat it replaces. We did too. And when you get underway, you realise something else first. Why Outremer are so popular.
We've been cracking along for a couple of hours now, and the breeze has come up. In fact, it's come up quite a lot. We've got gusts of up to 29 knots at times, which has made it quite fruity. The sea state's got quite entertaining as well. But we are still cracking along at 10 or 11 knots. Very impressive. It's such a sure-footed feel on this boat, and a really nice boat to helm as well. And just in case you're thinking, well, come on, I know about Outremer, I need some comparisons. Well, I have one for you, because just to leeward is an Outremer 55. We're actually doing this as a double act to get some kind of comparison. And the 55 is obviously a little bit bigger, but we've just been tracking alongside her now for a couple of hours. There's not much difference in speed, even though this is a smaller boat. One of the things that's particularly interesting about this boat right from the off is the steering, because it's not quite what you'd expect. Yes, it's very comfortable. Yes, it's in a great place. You can see forward, very comfortable seating here. But it's also a very innovative arrangement, because this whole pedestal actually rotates all the way in. In fact, it's got, I think it's 4 positions. We'll show you some of that a little bit later. But that's not all. Because interestingly, whilst you might expect to find this on the other side of the boat, it isn't. Because on the port side of the boat, you get this, a carbon tiller, which is quite a lot of fun. We've actually got quite a big swell running down here and we're surfing down the waves. It's a big boat to be handling on a tiller, but it's good fun. It's easy to do. You certainly get into the groove of it going downwind. But why would you want to have a boat with asymmetric steering? Well, there are a number of reasons. According to Outremer, and I've no reason to doubt them, these are blue water cruising boats that spend most of their lives on autopilot. So actually, in many ways, it doesn't matter where the steering position is. And certainly if you look across, I'd say probably the majority of the multi-hull cruising scene, certainly the cruising cats, you'll find steering positions that are offset anyway. So maybe it's not that different in the first place. The other reason they say that they didn't offer the wheel that you've got on the starboard side on the port side was because to do that would use up quite a lot of space in the cockpit and compromise some of the bits that they're really justifiably quite proud about, including the really nice walk-through into the cockpit area. This whole area works so well, so they would have had to have compromised that. And actually, having a tiller is a bit of fun. And anybody who knows Outremer's will know that a lot of their boats, particularly boats like the 4X, was a tiller steer boat and a lot of fun to sail as well. So it's not really that big a break from tradition. In fact, you could argue it's exactly what they're about. But it's certainly an interesting way of doing it. We're about 7 or 8 miles away from our anchorage just off Marseille, and the breeze has dropped, and I'm pleased to say the sea state has calmed down as well, although we do have this very long sweeping swell behind us which is allowing us to surf down the waves, which is a bit of fun as well. But with the decrease in the breeze, we then furled up the staysail, pulled out the big headsail and chucked out the 2 reefs in the main, all of which was dead straightforward, all of which was performed from right in front of me. Very easy, very straightforward. We're now, as I say, sailing in left breeze, but actually sailing quicker. We are over 10 knots all the time. We've hit a peak speed of just over 13 knots, and the boat is so well balanced. Not that she wasn't before, but you can just feel how that extra knot of speed and the balance between the main and the jib has given her that really nice, sensitive and direct feel. And that's got me thinking about that P word all over again, because that's what performance is about, for me anyway. It's a beautiful boat to sail, particularly now. It's very well balanced, we can surf down waves. And when you look at the boat from off the boat and you look at that big, powerful sail plan and the big square top main, you can see where she generates her power and her performance from. But it's all very, very manageable indeed.
After a day of downwind fun, we arrived at the Frioul Islands just off Marseille, which, aside from creating an opportunity to admire her at rest, also gave me the chance to take a closer look at her accommodation.
If you're familiar with the Outremer 51, one of the things that you'll notice straight away on the 52 is that the entrance into the boat is very different. On the 51, it's a conventional up onto the side deck and then down into the cockpit area, whereas on the 52 they've engineered a really nice walkway through, so it's a much easier passageway through into the cockpit area. The second thing you'll notice is that whilst it feels very secure and very enclosed, which were characteristics that Outremer wanted to bring across from the 51 that were very popular, you'll notice it's the same kind of feel in here, but there's a lot more space. One of the favourite places to sit is here, and I particularly like this. Is a bar. It's basically a bar stool area looking forward, but where you can eat and look forward. You have a fantastic view out through these windows all the way around. I mean, you have really, really good visibility. And the other thing that strikes you straight away is these big wide open doors. So you've got this sort of patio door that comes to the centre here, but you've also got sliding windows that come, basically you lift up this section here and these windows slide out, so you can close this all off and secure it all off. But when it's open, it's a fantastic open space, and it really makes that connection between the saloon and the galley area and the living space outside. You've almost doubled your space by doing that.
The galley, well, for someone as greedy as me, it looks superb. It's huge. There's so much workspace here. And this particular boat is set up with gas and electric hob. It's got an oven. We have a freezer over in the corner. This is a freezer here. We have a fridge over here, big fridge here. So what else? Well, we've got the navigation station, which sits central in the saloon area. Again, great visibility, looks forward, chart plotter, radio, all the comms you want, power down here. But it also acts as a workstation as well. And then just over in this corner here, then we've got the sort of saloon, the main saloon area. At the moment, this table is down in its sort of coffee table configuration, but you can lift that up, open it out. It even forms a bed here, so you've got a nice big space. Right, let's go and have a look down in the hulls. This boat is set up as a 3-cabin configuration, so we'll go and have a look in the starboard hull, which on this boat is the owner's cabin. What strikes you straight away is the visibility. Again, you're going to hear this quite a lot on the Outremer, but you've got these lovely windows out the side, and from your berth you have a fantastic view outside, so long as you've managed to anchor in a fantastic place, of course. But lovely visibility, very spacious. One of the things they've done this time around is actually they've lowered the height of the berth. Apparently on the 51 it was quite high, and that was to do with the size of the bulkhead that was required. It needed to be quite a high bulkhead for structural reasons, which meant the berth was quite high, and some of the owners said that they would prefer it a little bit lower. Well, on this boat uses carbon fibre bulkheads for the main structural bulkheads, and they've been able to lower the berth down, which gives you that extra feeling of space down here, more volume. On that theme, we've got a lot of stowage here. Great big lockers here. Apparently you can, this one, you won't be able to see when I open the door, but basically in here is where you can have a washing machine or those kind of facilities in here. Plenty of space. You've got another one up here. There's just lots of space all around, including stowage space under the floor as well. There's plastic boxes and areas there for stowage, and indeed under the berth at the back. So you're not short of stowage space on this boat at all. Right, further up here, a giant hotel style heads and shower unit. Really nice. Plenty of space, nice big sink. Nice to see, I have to say, nice to see a sink that is actually quite deep. The water's going to stay in there. You'd be surprised at the number of boats that we go and test that have got very pretty looking sinks on them that are like shallow dishes. You heel over and the water just comes straight out. Nice to see it. Ironic that it's on a boat that doesn't heel, but anyway, there we go. And up here, well, I'll stand in there to show you. Huge, great big shower stall. I mean, I'm only a shorty, but it's a massive shower stall and really, really comfortable. One other thing I like, a little bit cheeky, but I think this has to be the best view from the smallest room in the house that I've ever come across. Quite remarkable. You don't need to bring a newspaper in here. Okay, let's go and have a look on the other side of the boat, in the other hull. So, as I say, this boat is a 3-cabin configuration, and so we have one cabin forwards, which is a double, a little bit smaller than the aft one, but of course this is the forward cabin, but it's still got plenty of light, plenty of ventilation. So this is the guest cabin. It's the same proportions, the berth is the same proportions as the owner's cabin. Again, plenty of light, plenty of space, plenty of ventilation, lots of stowage. It really is a very nice space indeed. So there we have it. That is the interior of the 52. I have to say, I really like it. I think it's a very clever mix of stylish design, but most of all, a practical approach to what you're going to need for blue water cruising, where space and visibility are two of the key factors. And this 52 has got it in bucket loads. The 51, was and is a great boat, hugely popular, and when you're on it you can see why, but this is a step up, of that there is no doubt. After a very convivial evening where we tested entertaining to the full, it was time to get back underway for the return passage. Yesterday was a bit of a baptism of fire, but she certainly performed extremely well. But today she's revealing a different side, and it's very impressive. Because for a lot of people, it's what happens in the light airs that probably counts for a bit more. How early do you have to actually put those engines on? How little breeze can you sail in? Well, the answer's revealing itself this morning. We started off with about 5 or 6 knots of breeze, and she ghosted along at 3 or 4 knots quite happily. But as the breeze came up to what it is now, 12 knots, we're going upwind at 9 knots in 12 knots of breeze at a true wind angle of 67 degrees. That's pretty good for any cat. And the reason for that, well, apart from the superb sail plan, is the dagger boards. On the leeward side, we're fully down, and she draws a staggering 2.6 metres. That's why she goes upwind. As we made our way back out into open waters, the breeze and sea state started to build again. But this time, we were hard on the wind. We've had quite a variety of conditions, largely in sea state. And that's been particularly interesting aboard this boat, because whilst the sea state is flat and we've got about 15 to 17 knots of breeze now, 10 minutes ago it was a very different story. We had over 20 knots of breeze and a much bigger fetch and bigger waves and a very awkward sea state to get over, and we were going dead upwind. And that appears to be where this boat really excels. Outremer have always made a big thing about their boats going wind in 20 to 30 knots true, and I can see why. Because as we were sailing upwind in that difficult sea state, you could really feel the influence of the dagger boards. Every time we came over a wave and down the other side, you just need to put the bow down a little bit, press on the board, the boat would accelerate, and off you go again. It was a very satisfying experience, if I'm honest. What about that innovative steering system? Well, essentially there are 4 positions for it. There's this one, where you're sitting outboard, looking ahead. There's this one, where you're close to the controls and the autopilot. You have a perfect view all the way around, great for manoeuvring. There's this one, which is halfway between inside and out. And then there's fully enclosed. It's quite cosy. Okay, let's have a look at some of the detail now. I mean, bearing in mind that this sail handling area is just in front of the wheel, so you can easily step forward, no problem at all. So it's pretty straightforward. We've got the self-tacking jib sheet on the outside. We've got the staysail halyard there. We've got the conventional jib sheet for the overlapping headsail here. And then this winch, which is powered, it's got buttons down here. You can have any of these winches powered. On this particular boat, it's just this one here. If it was mine, I'd have that one powered as well, but there we go. Then moving in, we've got reefs 1, 2 and 3, and then this is the main sheet. So it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you can control the main sheet from here very easily. In fact, you can control pretty much everything from here, and you are just a step in front of the wheel. But, I hear you say, what happens if you've got the wheel inside and you're sailing the boat from down there? Well, it's quite ingenious, because basically you take the jib sheet around this winch, it goes through a turning block there, it basically goes down, round another turning block and onto a winch on a pedestal or a plinth just down by the steps. It's a very clever solution and very simple as well. So back here in the aft port quarter, we've got controls for the mainsail. We have main sheet traveller here, pretty straightforward, one red line, one green line, up, down the traveller, very easy, particularly easy to get it up the traveller because it's a powered winch. We've also got a main sheet down here as well, so when the whole cockpit area is enclosed, you can control the main sheet from here. When it comes to her layout up forward, she's pretty straightforward. She's got a detachable furling staysail here that we were using yesterday on a profile furler.
We've got another furler here, conventional furler for the normal Genoa, and then off the bowsprit another profile furler for the Kite and the Code Zero. All pretty straightforward really. So is when it come back here, the stowage. It's got just loads and loads of stowage. Plenty there, water tank on that side, anchor stowage as you'd expect to find down there, and then on the other side it's pretty much the same. And there's even more stowage in the forward sections in both bows. There's loads of it, plenty of space for sails, warps, anchors, fenders, whatever you like. In fact, to be honest, I wouldn't be at all surprised if some people choose to turn one of these at least into a cabin, at least short-term cabin. But what's interesting about this boat is that actually the most significant bits, at least I think some of the most significant bits, are the bits you can't necessarily see. Yes, you can see the mast, of course, but this is a carbon mast. Now, it comes standard with an alloy mast, but Outremer are very keen to push the carbon one. And the reason? Because with this one, you save 160 kilos. That is a lot of weight to save, and has a big effect on that P word, the performance word. But that's not the end of it. What's interesting about this boat is that when you compare this to the 51, which is the boat it replaces, this boat was always intended to be wider, to be a better performing boat. But wide means lots more material, and more material means more weight. So when they looked at the weight studies, they realised that unlike the 51, which is a completely glass boat, this boat, to save weight, they were going to make the main structural bulkheads in carbon fibre. Comes standard like that, and it saves a whopping 600 kilos. Yep, 600 kilo saving by putting carbon bulkheads in. So you put 600 kilos saving there, 160 kilos saving there, and you begin to see why this boat performs like it does. And if you really want to go to town on saving weight, you could always tick an optional extra box to have a carbon coach roof. That'll save you 100 kilos. When it comes to power, solar is quite an important part of it on this boat. As you can see, there are solar panels on top of the bimini. In fact, the bimini was made just that bit bigger to be able to accommodate 9 panels on the top here, and then there's 4 on the davits further aft. And combined, that's sufficient to generate between 2 and 3 kilowatts. The arguments for a multi-hull are well known. Space, volume and practicality, to say nothing of the lack of heel. But often there's a price to pay when it comes to the sailing experience. Too often the feel is a bit numb, not real sailing. Often the performance is missing too. But not so on the Outremer 52. This is a boat that grows on you, especially when you see how she copes across a range of conditions. If you're not doing 10 knots, you're probably doing something wrong. And while I'm not here to repeat phrases from their brochure, when they say their boats are blue water performance cruisers, they mean it. And they're not afraid to use the P word. Once again, and as always, thank you so much for watching. If you want to dig deeper, there's plenty more on the YouTube channel and on our website. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe. It's free, but it makes a big difference. Hit the notification bell to make sure you know when the next feature is online. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and in the meantime, stay safe, stay well. Until next time.